morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours. I'm Brent Ozar, Microsoft Certified Master, which just means I've made a lot of expensive mistakes with SQL Server over the years, and now I get to help other people avoid some of those same mistakes. Now, the way that I do these streams is sometimes I do blogging, sometimes I do script work, sometimes I do development. Today I'm just going to be answering the questions that you posted in the URL there on the screen at polgab.com/room/Brento. Matt says, good to see you live. Good to see you as well. SQL Dev DBA in the house. This week will be my last live stream for a couple of weeks. I am going on an Alaskan cruise this Sunday morning. I fly to San Francisco and board a cruise from San Francisco up through Alaska. I love sea days on cruise ships, so I purposely picked the San Francisco cruise because I get like 2 days of sea days heading up to Alaska, and then another 2 days as I come back down from Alaska. It's my first Alaskan trip since the pandemic, since even before COVID. I've been there a bunch of times, probably 10 times up through Alaska now, and love it. A lot of times when I get done with the cruise, I'm like, oh, I don't know that I ever need to see Alaska again. And then like within like a year or two, I'm immediately like, oh, I should probably go see Alaska again. Matt Valiant subscribed with Prime. Thank you. For those of you who have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to one channel for free on Twitch. You just log in with your Amazon account and you get one subscription totally for free. Office Hours Grizzly Edition. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's see here. So there's one question, the first one that the highest voted, and this comes up all the time in various different slight ways. Where do you see artificial intelligence having the most impact on DBAs? And of course, for the longest time, when the cloud was coming out, I think the cloud, Azure SQL DB, I think first hit, it's more than a decade ago. It might have been 2007, 2008. People were like, the cloud is going to take your jobs. It's going to do everything. Now, I expect for the next 2-3 years, I'm going to be hearing the same thing about AI. The thing with AI isn't that it's going to take your job. It's a new tool that helps you do more with less time. And that's good. That might make you say, well, less people are going to be able to, Matt says, I remember when blockchain was going to take my job. You might think, oh, that means that less people are going to be able to do more. Well, it would be really cool if the amount of data work was going down. But that's never been the case. There are always more databases with more sources of data. People want to do more things with them. More new tools come out every year. So I just expect that over the coming decades, AI will change your job and it'll change the way that you work, just like it already has for developers. Helps you more easily troubleshoot code and write unit tests, for example. But it doesn't build whole applications from scratch. Next up, It's a Me asks, Brent, is it still best practices to have databases split to multiple MDF files? It's always funny when someone comes in with an assumption like that, where they're like, well, is it still the case that you beat your wife? Well, hold on a second here. There's not a right answer. I never beat my wife. What are you talking about? So I take that same issue with this question. It's never been a best practice to split all databases into multiple MDF files. It was a best practice under certain circumstances. There's one best practice for TempDB. You can learn about that in my class, Fundamentals of TempDB, and that's still true today. There's a different reason behind it for user databases. The way that you think about it is, if your pipeline in between the user databases and their storage, not just the speed of the storage, but the pipeline between the user databases and the storage, if that's not fast enough, then it makes sense to have multiple pipelines, whether or not you have the same storage or not. So It's a Me, what you want to do is look into where was it a best practice to begin with, and yes, absolutely, that is still true today for specific kinds of databases on specific kinds of servers. You can learn more about that in my Mastering Server Tuning class, but it's definitely not something that you want to do overall across the board. Next up, Mr. SqlSeeks says, is it an accurate assumption that as SQL Server cardinality estimates improve, the estimates get more, or the engine gets more aggressive in using those estimates? No, not at all. That has never been true. SQL Server builds estimates with unknown quality. Like depending in my mastering query tuning class, we talk about how sometimes it'll guesstimate just one row, for example. It'll build estimates with an unknown quality and certainty. I should do my hand this way. And then the separate part of the engine, I say separate part of the engine, the next step in query processing, determining what you're going to do with those numbers of rows, what next table you're going to act on, which indexes you're going to use, that uses the same level of confidence whether the guess is garbage or whether the guess is really good. So those two things have never been related in any way. He says, so why is it that some queries are awful once you change the compatibility level? The compatibility level, what that does, among many other things, what that does is it influences how many rows SQL Server estimates are going to come out of each operator. It's a part of the engine called the cardinality estimator, or the CE. We talk about that in my fundamentals of query tuning class and my mastering query tuning classes. Mr. SqlSeeks continues by asking, were the previous engine versions more forgiving? No, not at all. Current versions and current compatibility levels are much more forgiving. Microsoft has learned over the years or over the decades that their cardinality estimator, as all cardinality estimators will make mistakes. And so they're building flexibility into there in order to recover when the estimates are really, really bad. And I'll give you an example. Adaptive joins. Adaptive joins make real-time decisions as data's flowing through the execution plan, so it helps it recover much better from really crappy estimates. So, no, that's not a correct assumption. Good morning, D. Sanchez. Matt says, if I bribe Clippy with more money, does he make better decisions? Okay, so I know you were being facetious, but here's the thing, yes. How do you bribe Clippy with more money? Enterprise Edition. And then what happens in Enterprise Edition? You get features like adaptive joins. Can you believe it? You were having fun with that question, but it's actually a good question, and the answer is yes. Clippy does get better when you spend more money on it. Oh, and I should have said Tegucigalpa. I think I got that right. Tegucigalpa. I remember from when Mr. Sanchez was in class with me that I got that correct, I believe. The Digit Panda. I kind of like that name. That's kind of cool. Digit Panda. That's kind of cool. Next up, StillLearning asks, hi Brent, I'm trying to understand why so many people think partitions with SQL Server will improve the performance of their queries. Simple answer. Microsoft told them it would. When SQL Server 2005 came out and partitioning was first invented, I remember because I happened to be building a data warehouse at that time, and I was like, partitioning sounds like it's exactly what I need. And in the beginning, as with all features from Microsoft, you can kind of think of it as there's two crews over at Microsoft. There's the crews that actually build the feature, and then the marketing crew that has to sell the feature. And the marketing crew will sometimes put a shine on it that isn't necessarily appropriate. It slices, it dices, it hecatons, it juliennes. You will never need a database administrator again. When in reality, the people who actually built the feature are like, hold on, that's not quite true. It's got a lot of limitations, but can you please not oversell it? And so when table partitioning came out, the marketing people were like, this is the way to make multi-terabyte data warehouses amazing. Your queries will perform in milliseconds. And they would do demos from the stage, and they still do that with every new feature. They'll bring it out and they'll say, look, we can query to 15 terabytes worth of data with 10 trillion rows in less than 30 milliseconds. But if you scratch the demo at all, like if you dig into the code or the underlying data, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. This is an edge case. It's never. But at the same time, if you're the marketing team, that's what you want, is you want edge cases that show off how amazing your product is. So that's where the reputation for partitioning came from, at least in my opinion. As a guy who was there when it happened. Eduardo says, M2 says a random non-related question. Shoot those over in the office hours just because I can't track where the questions come through when they're coming fast and furious. It's easiest to have it all in one place. Eduardo says, should you purchase third-party monitoring software for Azure SQL DB? Well, why do you buy monitoring software? There are generally 3 reasons why. 1, is it down right now? Azure's built-in tools, as with Amazon's or Google's, are nearly free. They're pretty inexpensive and can do a pretty good job of answering that question. Number 2, why are queries slow right now? Unfortunately, the built-in portals don't do a good job of answering that question. But you know what? Not everybody needs to know it. Because with a lot of applications, you either don't have performance problems or you can't control the performance problems. Like if it's a third-party vendor and you can't do anything about it and the users have been complaining for years and nobody cares. So in that case, it's up to you whether or not you need that answer to that question. And then the third one is, why was performance bad yesterday? I don't know about you, but people never wanted to see things live with me. They're always like, oh, can you tell me why my query was slow at 4:32 p.m. in the afternoon? Which query? I'm not really sure about that. So it's nice to have a console that you can rewind through time and point and go what was going on in the server at that time. I think that the built-in portals, do a better job of answering that question, like historically, than they do right now. It's a little easier to go in and use those consoles to see what were the most resource-intensive queries, several hours ago or minutes ago. They're not quite as good for right now. So if you do want to just jump back in time and you know queries or you know the exact time, then the built-in portals are actually pretty good. None of those really give you interpretive guidance. They don't tell you what to do about the query or what to do about your indexes. And for that, third-party monitoring tools are still pretty awesome. But I think the vendors are trying to make it better to catch up. Gitan says, good afternoon from Wales. Good afternoon to you as well. Malmo says, what's your opinion of using simultaneously BitLocker and SQL TDE to protect data? Okay, so first off, I don't do any security consulting at all. It's actually ruled out in my contract. I say, you can't hire me for security advice. That's not the thing that I want to do. But just to reframe your question, most people these days use encryption at rest at the storage level. It's especially popular in cloud providers, for example. You want to make sure that the cloud provider has a few barriers before they can just pull your data off easily, especially if they get hacked. So what you're thinking of is the combination of BitLocker and TDE. Is it exactly the same as running TDE, transparent data encryption, almost anywhere else up in the cloud, or where you're using shared storage that has built-in encryption at rest? It's fairly common to see those used together. Next up, Marcus the German says, let's have an availability group which is set up correctly. Oh, sure. Yeah, you're the one who set it up correctly. Meanwhile, everyone else in the world is, believe me, I see a lot of AGs. This is, the app is configured to read from the secondary. Should I see the select statements in the secondary's activity monitor? Okay, first off, put activity monitor down, close that tab, never open it again. It's hot garbage. It's junk. Instead, use SP who is active or SP blitz who. Both of those are designed to show you exactly which queries are running right now. They don't hide things the way that activity monitor does. Switch to those tools instead. Assuming that you're using those tools, the answer is yes. The query should show up on the secondary. Let's stop here and we'll take a ad break, a 90-second ad break. So those of you who aren't subscribed to the Twitch channel will see 90 seconds worth of ads. That's my subtle way of encouraging you to subscribe to the channel. You can do it totally for free with Amazon Prime. Now, for those of you who are subscribed, you'll get a bonus question. So let's see here. Where's my magic button? There's that one. Bonus question. Stimpy says, what are the top challenges that versionless SQL Server poses to the first responder kit? This is a term that I almost never hear, versionless SQL Server. What this means is Azure SQL DB. So the problems with Azure SQL DB for the first responder kit is there's no change log. Microsoft doesn't tell us what they changed and when. They don't tell us what they add. They don't tell us what they take out. And so as someone, they do some marketing high-level change stuff, but they don't do all the real blow-by-blow changes to the DMVs, for example. And since I heavily rely on DMVs in the first responder kit, I used to try to keep making it compatible, and I would bring out a version of the first responder kit and say, look, we're ready to go. And then like 30 days later, Microsoft would break a DMV and people would come back to me for support like, you said you worked with Azure SQL DB. And I'm like, we did. What happened? So these days with SQL Constant Care, I actually harvest Azure SQL DB's DMVs so I can see when they change. And they don't change across all my clients at the same time. Different clients get access to different previews in Azure SQL DB. And of course, none of this is documented. So I'm able to start watching what Microsoft is doing with Azure SQL DB, and it gives me confidence about when I'm going to be able to put in a version of the first responder kit that's going to be safe and stable. We are not there yet. They are still changing things fast and furious. Shout out to Thumbs Up Joe, subscribed at Tier 1 for 3 months. Thank you. That's fantastic. I appreciate it. Very cool. Folks like you are what enable me to live the lifestyle that I do. Woohoo! GP Geek says, good day from Montreal. Good to see you. Next up, Janus asks, I see a lot of videos for SQL on Linux, but does this feature really get used all that much? No. No. So why do you see videos on it? Well, when Microsoft brings out something new and they want you to use it, what do they have to do? They have to evangelize it. They have to train you on it. Nobody needs to do videos on how to install SQL Server on Windows because it's been the same for 23 years. So you don't see a lot of breaking news about that one. That's why there's so much videos on SQL Server on Linux. Let's come back over here. Leif asks, on a really wide table where users search every column, will it be best to use column store indexes? Great question. I got questions like this all the time when I first started working with Column Store and blogging about it. To help you answer them, I created columnscore.com. Like Column Store, but S-C-O-R-E, columnscore.com. You go to columnscore.com, and it's a totally free site where you answer like 10 questions about the table that you want to use Column Store indexes on, and based on that, I give you a grade from A to F about how likely it is that that implementation will be successful, that you'll have a good time on Column Store indexes. Just like your high school grades, D's get degrees. If you get a D, don't be all broken-hearted the way that you were in high school, and I still can't believe that you got a D in physical education. How bad do you have to suck to get a D at physical education? That's shameful. Just because you did hit the kid with the javelin that one time doesn't mean that they should have given you the D. That's not fair. But D's get degrees. It's just that it's going to be harder for you in life to be successful with Column Store on a table that gets a D as opposed to if you get a grade A, whammo, you are almost guaranteed that you're going to be successful. Not completely guaranteed. I got all A's through school, and my success was a heck of a rocky road as well. Going Parallel says Brent got a D in physical education. Buckle up. You are going to have a really hard time believing this. Not only did I get A's in physical education, I taught it. My high school PE teacher, never forget her name, Gay Adams, was the sweetest old woman. She was in the Olympics when she was a kid. She took a liking to me. We had a great time together. She's a really tough woman. I just totally cracked her nut. I was like, oh, I know exactly how to work with you. We had a great time, and I ended up being a teacher's assistant for her for the next 2 years. Took it in my sophomore year of high school, and I was like, I want to do this. So I spent an hour a day teaching PE. Unbelievable. Absolutely crazy. Next up, Going Parallel asks, how do you prevent yourself from burning out and recognizing when you need to take a step back? For me, something that was really important for me was the book Getting Things Done by David Allen. It's not a new book. It's probably 20, 30 years old at this point. Getting Things Done by David Allen. And one of the things he teaches you to think about is you got your work life, you got your personal life, and you got taking care of yourself. And by personal life, I mean, running errands, family, friends, things that you have to support, and taking care of yourself. You need to break up your day into chunks and then realize that you're always going to be behind at work. There's always going to be more stuff that you need to do. But if you go work beyond the hours that you agreed to work yourself, then you are sacrificing your personal time, and which is friends and family. You're also sacrificing the taking care of yourself time, and it's a ticking time bomb. So what helped me with that, and the book goes into much more details, is being able to say, okay, at 5 p.m., I have to leave. It doesn't matter how much of a good time I'm having at my job. It doesn't matter how behind I am. I have to go. And did that suck for my managers? Did it suck for me personally? Absolutely. But I had to sit down and say, you know what? If you've got more work than I can handle, you need to hire more staff. And if the company won't hire more staff, it's because they don't care enough to spend the money to get those extra problems solved. That's their choice, not your choice. The company is telling you it is not worth the money to them. So why would you do it for free? Stop working at, and I don't care which time it is, whatever time it is that you pick, stop working and then think you got to go clock in at your other job. You got to go clock in at your family job. You got to start making a list of what are all the things that I need to do to become a better sibling, parent, son, whatever it is. Make that list and go start working through those just as if they were tasks assigned to you in Jira. So that's my advice for you there on that one. Durlai says that's the best advice you could give right there. I have see so many younglings killing themselves. I say older, more mature. Older doesn't mean more mature. Let me tell you that. I see people at all levels of their career making that same mistake as people get older and older, and they're like, I'm working so hard. How come it's not paying off? And then meanwhile, they're absolutely miserable and they're drinking themselves to death in a corner. So it's terrible. SQL Dev DBA references the quote from Lori Edwards that I love. The people that you work for are waiting for you at home. Lori Edwards is a wonderful person out of Arizona. I haven't talked to her in a little while, but I love that quote. The people that you work for are waiting for you at home. Lovely, lovely quote. McClan says, hi, Brent, happy 21st anniversary. Thank you. Says, I just wanted to say thank you. You're welcome. I'm an accidental part-time DBA. Took a few of your courses, helped a lot. That's awesome to hear. Next up, Nortzi asks, hi, Brent, I've heard from you and others that it's a really bad idea to shrink your data files. Other than causing index fragmentation, are there other compelling reasons not to do this? Yes. One is that it's a logged activity. SQL Server's moving one 8K page around at a time, and it's logging its work in the transaction log. That causes more writes that also have to be issued over to other places, like things like database mirroring, always on availability groups, your log backups. It can also be a blocking operation. It tries not to be, but it can be a blocking operation. The other thing is it hammers your storage, moving around one 8K page at a time. Another thing is that it blows up your differential backups. It blows up the sizes of your SAN snapshot backups. And I'm going to give you a little bit of tough love. I talk about this in my blog posts on fragmentation. You can't just read the title in the first paragraph. You have to read the whole entire thing. Next up, David Singleton says, thanks for sharing. Your recorded classes are a bargain. Hey, all right, cool. Glad to hear that. Is there some way in an SSMS query to tell it which SQL server to connect to? Yes, this is so rare. It's called SQL command mode, SQL CMD mode. And with that, you can tell SQL Server Management Studio to behave exactly like the SQL command utility. I don't think I've ever used it once in my life. I've seen other people use it, but the idea behind it is, let's say that you're going to go configure an always-on availability group. You got to connect to a whole bunch of different SQL servers and run a whole bunch of different commands, and you have to run them in the right order every time. So what you could use SQL CMD mode for is to say, okay, go connect to this server over here, run these commands. Now go connect to this server over here, run these other commands. So why doesn't anybody use it? Last time I saw people using it, which was probably about 11 years ago when availability groups first came out, is that it broke IntelliSense. You couldn't use IntelliSense anymore once you switched over to SQL CMD mode. I don't know about you, but I use IntelliSense all the time. Is it perfect? No, it has all kinds of problems, but it's sure better than my T-SQL. I make so many errors when I step through it. It's out there. It's just not something that I see people using. SQL Devs, or no, GP Geek says, I used to have an add-on to SSMS that allowed you to switch it within a query. It could be Power or SSMS Tools by Mladen Project. If you search for SSMS Tools, all one word, it could be that. That's the most powerful SSMS add-on that I've seen. Give that one. I don't use it. I have a weird problem with, as a consultant, I'm not usually allowed to install things on the client in advance. Like I have to parachute into somebody's SSMS. Sometimes it's even a Herculean task to get them to put the first responder kit on there, let alone any other tools. So if I still had a real job where I connected to the same SQL servers every day from my same machine, I would probably use SSMS Tools from Mladen Project and Redgate's SQL Prompt. Both of those are paid. They have paid versions. They have like free starter versions, and then you have to pay if you want to use it full time. I think they're both worth the money. I think they're both that good. Matt says SQL CMD is super useful when using SQL Server data tools. I'll tell you another secret. I don't use that either. I tried. I went to a couple of classes on data tools over the years. I went when it was called Data Dude, and they kept trying to reinvent stuff. And I'm like, why don't you call me when you have the same UI for like 5 years straight? You know, once you've got it in for a while, then I'll talk to you. Otherwise, I'm going to would now called Visual Studio for what? So, and now we kind of have the same problem again because it's coming back out into Azure Data Studio now. They're doing some kind of data tools thing for Azure Data Studio. I'm like, somebody over there just keeps seeing squirrels running by the desk, and they keep running off in different directions. It's really bizarre. mtdodev.net says, random non-SQL related question. Do you have any pictures of your office layout? We're moving into our new house, and I like your setup we're curious about what the overall layout is. So when I bought this house, I've moved every couple of years over the last several years, including, if you go back through the videos, I'm in Iceland, I'm in San Diego, all over the place. And I tend to gradually tweak it every few years. I wanted, when I did this home office, I wanted bookshelves across the back where I could put all kinds of knickknacks that were visually interesting to me. So this is one wall. On this wall over here, it's a green screen. The wall is just literally painted green for chroma key work. This wall over here is a standing desk, so it's just a small motorized standing desk with a camera on it that shoots this way, so that when I change cameras from this, whoops, let me get over that. When I change cameras over to here, this is another camera that's now shooting back against the green screen wall, so that this way I can do demos or share my desktop, whichever way it is. Come back over here. So that gives you 3 of the walls. So there's the bookcase wall, there's this computer and a camera. Behind that, there's a window overlooking the street, my green screen wall, and then the wall behind the camera there, I've got a couple of lights on it and a big closet where I can put like electronics gear. It's a pretty small room. It's about 10 foot by 10 foot, but I did that on purpose, is that I remember what we just talked about with getting things done and bailing out at a certain time. I want to, when my time is up, I want to get out of the office. I don't play games in here. I don't do anything really in here that's not related to work. The instant that I'm done with work, I leave the office. And I may need to do computer stuff for like buying things from Walmart or Amazon or whatever, but I only do those on tablets. Like I only use an iPad for that, not a computer, because I find that if I sit down at a computer, I want to do work. Work kind of blows. GP Geek says, can you enjoy your backyard? It's still a sand pit right now. It's funny, I was just talking back and forth with my contractor about an hour before the call started, and they've screwed things up yet again, so the project's on hold for another few days while they figure out how they're going to recover from their last mistake. Just a total poop show, but no, I cannot enjoy that yet. We're at least 2 months away from that, if not 3 or more. It's in pretty bad shape. And then the last question that we have in the queue, Yǐmò says, how should DBAs describe what they do for a living to non-technical peeps? When someone asks me what I do, I say I work with computers. That's all I say. Because most of the people out there, as soon as they hear you work with computers, they're done. They're like, oh, so what hobbies do you have? Or where do you live? Or whatever. If someone fires up and goes, oh, I work with computers, what do you do? Then I go, I work with databases like Microsoft SQL Server. And then either they know it or they do not. 99% of the time, it's been they have no idea on either of those. Because even if they work with computers, they often do something like, oh, I do Java development, or, oh, I do customer support for Adobe, or, whatever the other oddball jobs are. So then that way, for the very few minority of people who are left, if they know what databases and SQL Server are, then I can say I'm a database administrator. But otherwise, I don't try to explain what database administration is to people who don't get into computers, because they just don't care. So Matt says, computers, I do work because my computers, hobbies are computers. Where do you live on computers? GP Geek says, Access. I say, absolutely. I say I work on the paid version of Access, because if someone knows what Access is, then they at least know what a database is. I say, oh yeah, I work on the paid version of that, the one that's like tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then they go, oh, okay, makes sense from there. All right, so those are all the oh no, there's one more. Oh, hold on a second. Oh no, for some reason the show which database to use for some reason didn't get shown up on there, but we've already covered through that. So that is all the questions in the queue. We will stop there. Thanks for hanging out with me at office hours. Tomorrow, I believe I'm going to be working on the first responder kit. I believe I'm going to be scripting inside of there. So I will see y'all at the next office hours. Adios.